the Scrum Pro app, the Scrum Pro platform, which is to give young aspiring rugby players the chance to put their rugby digital CV online, to let people know who they are, where they are, what they're able to do, and in turn to let clubs, to let teams, to let unions find some talent that they might otherwise have missed. It's a little more complex than that, but in the very best possible way. And so head on to Scrum Pro for a look if either you yourself are a young rugby player, or you know someone, you've got somebody, maybe one of your kids is an aspiring talent, and it really is a terrific platform. And by extension of that platform, what we do on this series once a month is catch up with a former rugby player, have a chat to them about the rugby story of his or her life, and get some advice and counsel for young players as they attempt to navigate what can often be a slightly challenging world into professional rugby. But no matter how challenging it might be, it probably won't involve your parents putting you on a train in Zambia when you're 6 and sending you down to Cape Town to go to school. But that is how the journey into South Africa began for a man who would go on to become not just a great Springbok captain, but one of the hardest rugby players the game has ever seen. And if you don't believe me, just ask the numerous surgeons who had to repair people who tried to get past him during games of rugby. Corné Krige, a very, very warm welcome.
Thanks very much, Dan. Thanks for the nice introduction.
It's a well-deserved one, because you had an extraordinary journey when your career started out. Most of the players we talk to, we kick off at sort of 16, 17 as they're hoping to get into provincial squad, or they look at their time when they first got seen at an academy or a Craven week. I think it's worth looking at your journey going right the way back to being just 5, 6 years old and getting on that train. How much of an impact do you think that had on Corné Krige, the person who we know now as such a tough and fearless leader?
You know, Dan, huge respect to my parents, you know, because I've got young kids now, and I realize now how incredibly difficult it would be for me to send them away. You know, my daughter's 15, and I see her, I drop her on a Monday morning in Paarl, which is about 45 minutes away from where I live. And then I pick her up on a Friday. So I see her on weekends. But for my parents, you know, they put me on a plane, never mind a train. At the age of 4, I turned 5 in grade 1. I was 2 years too young for my grade, but my mother was a school teacher, so she got me well ahead of the game and thought, no ways, I could make it easily make it when I went to Paarl Boys Primary in Paarl, 3,500 kilometers away. You know, so it was an incredible journey, and it was one that really toughened me up because, you know, I didn't have a mother or father shoulder to cry on. I had to sort out my own problems. And if there was a bully in the class, you know, I sorted him out very quickly.
It speaks to much of the character that we were then to see of Corné Krige on the rugby field, first in blue and white and then in green and gold. Your time at the start of your professional career, at what point did you start to think, I'm actually quite good at this game of rugby, maybe it's a dream I can make come true?
What's interesting about that, Dan, is that in 1993, I was SA Schools captain, and rugby only turned professional in 1996. And already when I was at school, I thought, you know, I'd like to make a career of this. And luckily in rugby's first professional year, I actually got my first contract. I'll never forget, it was 10,000 Rand a month. It was a lot of money for a student at the time. And yeah, so things just worked out really well in a way. So I got the back end of the amateur era and the beginning of the professional era, which was awesome because, you know, the characters that you find in the amateur game, you don't find them anymore. Everybody needs to be professional. It is now your house, your car, your job, your wife, your everything, you know. So in the past, it was just a hobby, you know. In the past, it was just guys who really had other jobs and did other things, and they were doctors and accountants who played rugby as a part-time game. And those were the real characters of the game.
It speaks of just how good a rugby player Corné Krige was that South Africa had to go professional just to make sure you could stay in the games. A great tribute to you. You speak of those dual identities of being a doctor and a player, being a plumber and a player. It's very much not the case now because rugby is full-time professional. But time and again, we've had in this space and in others, professional players who've been through their career emphasize that an element of that old school thinking still needs to be in play, because if tomorrow you get tackled by Corne Cruche and your rugby career is over, you have to have something to fall back on. What did Corne Cruche have to fall back on?
Nothing, Dan. I really had my back against the wall, and I played in a manner that really showed that, you know, I had nothing else. You know, I studied business management at the Cape Technicon. I didn't write my final exam, which I regret till today. But luckily things worked out for me. It's always good to get a degree or diploma or something behind your name, and just have something, have a backup, you know. So I didn't play with a freedom of, if this doesn't work, you know, maybe there's something else. I played with, I've got to make this work. My back against the wall. Every game was life and death for me, you know. So I really played in that way. And the one side it was a good thing, on the other side it was a bad thing. You know, I often stepped over the line of good sportsmanship and bad sportsmanship, and played a little bit dirty, maybe too aggressive. But I was small and young and just trying to make a living.
I love the fact that you say you're small. You're about twice my size, but this is rugby we're talking about. And it's a game that, as you say, it's hard, it's tough. It's a game that can injure players. The game can stop quite quickly. I'd imagine from what you've just said, your advice to today's young players is, yes, play hard. Yes, give it everything you've got, but do make sure that there is a plan B.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt. If you have something else, you can play with a little bit more freedom. You know, I look at a guy like Farid Duprier, who has done extremely well after rugby as well. But he sort of played with the freedom that excited me. You know, that he I knew he had another option. Rugby was just this great journey for him, and when it was finished, and he could walk into a business career that he's doing really well in. So that's just one example. You know, there's many others, but there's also many others who are struggling on the other side, who really don't have anything else after rugby. They've lost all their money. They really are struggling, and there's a lot of them around.
A big part of navigating the early days of a rugby career and then into a professional career, should you get one, is counsel, guidance, management, mentorship, agents. You and I have spent time with the same agency in years gone by. We know that space quite well. How important was it for you having the right agent, but also having the right people, the right mentors, the right friends around you?
It starts at school, Dan. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's just so true, you know, because if I look at the teachers that played a massive role in my life, you know, at Paul Boys High, you know, the discipline they gave me, the grounding they gave me at a school level, you know, helped me for the rest of my career, my rugby career, but also for the rest of my life, you know. So, and I'm forever grateful to them, you know. And teachers can either make you or they can break you, you know. And I luckily had a really bunch of great teachers who really looked after me, and I'm grateful to all of them. But then also friends and parents, and like you said, after school it becomes, you know, who's your agent, who are you using as a mentor, who are the people that are close to you that are actually looking out for you. Because when you're in it, it's extremely difficult to be level-minded. There's so much pressure, there's so much on the go, that you actually need somebody standing outside of your circle, looking in and saying, hey, Corne, this isn't right. You need to go this way. You know, what you're doing now isn't right. Go the other way. You know, just guidance and just a bit of help. I think, you know, if I had that all the way through my career, I think I would have maybe gone in a different path.
If you look back at the rugby career, there are many highs. You were an extraordinary leader. You had some great victories, some great individual performances. But in any life, in any career, there are times that aren't quite so good. What was the biggest challenge for you in the rugby career, and how did Corne Cruche overcome that challenge?
Well, obviously, one of the challenges is injury, and that's one thing that rugby players live with every day. I don't think I ever played without a niggle or a broken rib or something that bothers you. So injuries is one, and it can take you out of the game for a very long period of time. I had 2 massive knee injuries, amongst a lot of other things. But the knee injuries are the ones, the long ones. 8 months of rehab, 8 to 9 months before you get back onto the field. There's a loss of income. There's no game time, so no game money. So those are that's probably the biggest challenge. But then the other challenges obviously are that you travel a lot. It's hard to start a family if you're at an older age. It's hard to keep a girlfriend because you're always traveling around the world. In the World Cup in 2003, I was home for 85 days. And it's you can't think you can actually have a family if you're away from home that much. So I have huge respect for guys who manage to juggle all those balls and keep the family happy and keep the wife happy and the kids and still be a good father and still be a good rugby player. It's extremely tough.
Yeah, we bring in the example of Skulk Brits, I think, when we try and work out how all of that comes together.
That example of one of the guys who actually gets it right.
Yeah, he is a terrific example on so many levels. So are you too, then. The example that I always think of when it comes to Cornet is you've been through these injuries, you've had to deal with them, and you've managed to come back. Rehab can be a dark and lonely place. How did you keep yourself going during particularly trying times?
Well, I always took 2 months of whatever the doctor said. If it was 8 months, I tried 6 months. If it said 10 months, I tried 8 months. So I always try to get away a bit quicker. But it is you're 100% right. It's a long, lonely road. When you train really hard in rugby season, your reward is on the weekend when you play in front of 50,000 people, and it's that adrenaline and the amazing. That's your reward. Train hard, play hard on the weekend. That's your reward. Have a couple of beers with the boys. Train hard on Monday again. If you're rehab, that's a different ballgame. In rehab, you have no reward on the weekend. It's 8 months of grind, and just work hard. And I can tell you, towards the end of my career, I said I can handle another season, but I can't handle another injury. I can't handle another 8-month rehab. So I probably could have played another year or two, but I think my body's very grateful I didn't.
The loneliness to that time of rehab is, I don't think, dissimilar to the loneliness that some players experience when they do say goodbye to rugby, particularly those who don't get to say goodbye on their own terms, when injury cuts the game short or they find that their team no longer needs their services. How difficult for you was the transition from being part of the team, being with your teammates all the time, having that squad life, to all of a sudden that's gone?
Yeah, then it's probably, well, not probably, it's definitely the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. And I can tell you now, if you talk to any professional rugby player who's retired, it is the hardest thing. I spoke to Skalkberger the other day. Never mind the fact that you go from a massive income to pretty much a zero income unless you've got something else on the go. And you're a hero the one day and everybody talks about you and you're all over the newspapers, and the next day you're nothing, you just sit at home. And that's why I think it's so difficult. And that's where there's a group of players who've started to work to actually helping guys in that transition period from being a professional sportsman and going across into business. And remember, success is a very wide, broad term. So to be successful in sport is one thing, but that if you're extremely successful in rugby, it doesn't make you a successful person. You've still got to transition. You've still got to be a great father. You've still got to be a great husband. You've still got to look after your family. You've got to be a person that makes a difference in your society, a person that, that people look up to beyond rugby, not just because you were a good rugby player. And I think that's where a lot of the problems start. And that's where we, as some of the older players are starting to try and help people.
To be able to retire from rugby, of course, you need to have played rugby and you need to get in there. A lot of the young people watching this at the moment are hoping to do exactly that. If you had to pick up a couple of points in today's world from your experience, from what you know, what would your message, your advice be to a young rugby player, late teens, early 20s, hoping to make rugby their livelihood for the next decade or so?
Then there's a couple of things. One, I definitely, as I spoke earlier, I definitely get a degree or a diploma or get something else behind your name so that when you walk away from rugby, one day there's already something, an interest, there's something else that you can go to. That's the one thing. The second thing is if you're busy going up the ranks, I'd say always say this to my daughter. She's a really good tennis player, and she's very, very talented. And I say to her, hard work always trumps talent. Continuous hard work will always beat talent in the long run. However, if you're talented and you work hard, you find a Roger Federer and a Rafa Nadal and those kinds of players. So that's what I would say to any of the kids out there who want to play sport. There must be a massive enjoyment factor. It mustn't be a work for you. The enjoyment factor must always be there, and you must play with a youthful abundance. But you must also be able to just grind things out and really stick, and not, I think being loyal to a union these days isn't that common anymore. My days, it was like, you stay, if you're at Western Province, you never go to the Bulls, and if you're at the Bulls, you never go to Western Province. But I think, some loyalty to your fans and to the supporters of your local union and the people who brought you through the system, I think that counts for something. And just incredibly hard work always wins in the end.
Several great lessons to be learned there, and possibly a great prediction as well, because I've seen your wife play tennis and I know your work ethic. So I suspect there's a genuine superstar in the making there, Corné.
Yeah, she's doing really well, Dan. But she's 15 now, so she's not that. She's a bit lazy in my eyes. I'd like to get her to train a bit harder, but a love for the sport is much more important than any achievement in the sport. So I continuously work on just keep loving the game. The reason why we encourage our kids to play sport is because sport teaches you life lessons in a day. You can learn 3 life lessons in a day, and you can correct those 3 mistakes that you made in the same day or in a week's time. In life, it might take you years to correct those mistakes. So that's why we love encouraging our kids to play sport and just to enjoy it.
It is a wonderful, wonderful platform. And keeping that passion is probably as good a lesson as any that we'll take from you today, Corné. I'll ask you to leave us with one final word before you depart. You had this great career. You gave us so much joy on the field. We saw highs and lows, as we do with everybody. Give us a game, a moment that for you was just particularly special, one that we might not think of, that you look back on with great fondness.
People talk about our favorite opposition and our biggest enemies, call them enemies and friends. And it is New Zealand. If you ask any South African, he'll say New Zealand is the ultimate team to play against. And it's exactly the same for New Zealand. And I remember a specific game we played at Ellis Park, and we hadn't beaten the All Blacks for a while. And Robbie Fleck had an incredible game, and he scored 2 tries. And if I remember correctly, we won, I think it was 42-40 or 38. It was like just an absolute thriller of a game. And I'll never forget, it was probably the most tired I've ever been on a rugby field, just running myself to pieces just to try and win the game. And so grateful that in the end we did win it. But there's lots of those memories, and those memories bond you together as a group. So even if I don't see Robbie Fleck, or I see Sean Rue or whoever, if I don't see them for many years, it doesn't matter. If I see them again, it's like we haven't been away from each other, and we really enjoy each other's company.
It is the extraordinary bond of sport. And I think rugby in particular, that band of brothers, band of sisters that the game brings together in people, is fantastic. Corné, thank you for sharing the story. Thank you for sharing some sage counsel, some wisdom from the years. A little kid being sent down from Zambia and kicking off this extraordinary journey that ended up not being just a Springbok captain, but also a terrific leader. We see that in the business world now as well. So thank you for the advice. Thank you for sharing the stories with us. And who knows, perhaps the next Corné Krige is currently watching at the moment.
I hope so.
So there we go. Kwame Kweka, not just a Springbok captain now, a very successful businessman in his own right, and somebody who looks back on the game of rugby, what it's given him, and the opportunities and the challenges with a great deal of reflection and a great deal of insight. This has been the Gain Line with Scrum Pro. Big thank you for joining us. Do log on, have a look at Scrum Pro, at the app, at the development space. If you are an up-and-coming rugby player, it really is a terrific asset that could take that natural rugby talent of yours and show it to a much broader platform. Been a pleasure being with you. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll see you back again next month with another edition and another great South African rugby player offering some wisdom and some advice to the next generation of rugby superstars.